First of all, we can't go back to business as usual.
No.
We already know we can't allow this to die down because while we're still going through this pandemic, and there's no reason to believe this is not going to continue for many more months, you've got poor kids who are not connected to the internet.
Right.
And because they're poor, they can't learn.
Right.
And because they're poor, they can't get health care. And yet everyone is talking about a depression. There doesn't have to be a depression if we use our money appropriately. We can stimulate the economy. I mean, what do you think, Ray? It can't go back to where it was. We should be keeping the momentum going.
Well, that's what I was saying. It seems like each time you get into one of these things where there are a lot of protests and the issue is brought to the public, right out there in the public, and then after it's over, we sit back and wait to see what happens. Now, who's going to make it happen? How does it happen? I don't care what it is. Who's going to make the thoughts and the things that the protesters want? Who's going to make those real?
Legislation. Well, maybe.
Okay, how do you get the legislature to do it? You know, ours here in Massachusetts, they're more or less in back of everything we say and try and do, but then, as I say, you got to go to Washington or the State House here in Boston, right? Most of the wants of the people that are protesting, they are getting what they are crying about. But then if it's a major project, it has to go from the state down to Washington, D.C., where it doesn't get acted on.
Well, that'd give it expansion outside of the state of Massachusetts. But if every state did something, there couldn't help but not be national legislation, because that's what started with so many other things, state by state by state, and then the country took it on, you know.
Well, how many states, though, can we count on? We don't have at this point more than, I don't know if we have 50% of the states that are willing to do change.
Right. Look at
look at my own city, right? We have kids in incarceration. They're in jail for who knows what the reason is. It's minor. Most of them don't even belong there, but because they're too poor to have any kind of representation, they're warehoused. And now being warehoused in prison is almost like a death sentence, right? Because there's no rules. There's no way for you to be isolated from other people.
Right.
So I don't see any great movement to look at our policies for incarceration.
Because the business that generates that incarceration is funding the politicians.
Right.
And vice versa. So then they give the money back by funding the private jail, the privatization of imprisonment.
So back to the chicken and the egg. What comes first?
Right.
What comes first? We have the protests. I know for a fact that I never made change, cultural change, in any organization unless that organization wanted to change from the very beginning. So they gave me the agency, and I knew I was backed 100%. So we need the same thing here. It's got to come from the top down and the bottom up, because, it's like the civil rights movement under LBJ. He negotiated as best he could, but he was willing to do this. Bobby Kennedy was willing to do it.
But if LBJ did not have Russell, if he did not win Russell over, he never would have gotten any, I can't think of his first name. But
I
yeah.
remember Russell because
Yeah.
Russell was his best friend, and Russell said, "We'll do this for you."
But there goes the South.
But the South is no longer Democratic.
Right. And to a certain extent that happened.
Right, and Russell also, as LBJ's good friend and mentor, also said to him, LBJ wanted out of Vietnam, and Russell said, "You can't."
Oh,
And that was LBJ's undoing because he could not stand watching the boys die. He knew this was a war that should not be fought.
so it was a trade-off, basically.
Oh, yeah.
That was the trade-off.
That was
That's tragic. Well, it's like the tragedy that we have right now. If we could just make it through the next 5 months or whatever it is because the destruction that this man is doing is incredible. And if something doesn't happen soon, it's a question of, will we make it through and how bad can it get? It's
not bad. Last Saturday, I told you, I had made myself physically ill. I'm concerned about Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me whether people are red, green, purple, or whatever. I don't really, I don't want anyone to die. And
Right.
I felt that under Trump, he was looking to see people fight each other. And I was really concerned.
Right. And then you saw Pence on TV saying that I want to remind you about the amendment that entitles us to peaceful demonstration and the right of free speech, the First Amendment, I guess it is. But the reporter did not have a comeback, and somebody should have told him about the common good and, the state of the nation and criminal activities, willful criminal activities, but they didn't.
Yeah, but Pence even had a hard time just saying that, because it wasn't in his script to answer the reporter's question. Why wasn't he wearing the mask? And thing that gets me is that base list of Trump supporters. They don't care what he does. If you mention something that he has done that has created problems, they don't want to hear it. Forget about it. Like the poor farmers. Well, I heard this farmer the other day said, well, Trump is doing such a good job. And you say, what job is he doing? He's making it. He had just finished this.
Tank your market.
Yeah. This farmer had just finished saying how he was losing money on his crops. He couldn't grow the crops he needed to, or the ones he had grown, he had to get rid of because he couldn't sell them. And he was saying, well, didn't Trump promise you a better life? Yes, he did, but he can't do it right away. This guy was saying, the farmer was saying, he told us he can't do it right away, but for you to just sit and be patient and it'll get done. In the meantime, the poor farmers, they're getting killed. But as long as Trump stands up there and tells the people these lies, they believe him. And they like him because he'll get up and tell a lie and be opposite to what the rest of the people are thinking of doing. And he loves that. He loves that.
Well,
because he'll get his name in the paper.